Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Brear, and welcome to episode 69 of the 11FS FinTech Insider Breakfast Show. In this show, we bring you the best and the brightest from around the fintech and banking landscape every single weekday, straight into your homes at 8:30 BST, here, live, and on LinkedIn. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Ziv Cohen, who is the CEO of Paygilant. On this morning's show, we're going to be talking about fraud during the COVID-19 pandemic and actually how banks, companies, and their customers can protect themselves against it. So good morning, Ziv. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, David. How are you?
Not too bad, not too bad. It's been better weather, I have to say, in the UK, but I imagine it's a bit different weather-wise where you are, right?
It is actually. The sun is shining, and it's a beautiful day here in Israel.
Fantastic. Well, let's get into that in a second. I mean, as always, guys, over on LinkedIn, we will love getting your questions and comments. So if you've got any questions, got any comments for me or for Ziv, drop them in and we'll weave them into the conversation. But I just want to say before we get going, like, international audience is kind of crazy. We've got people this morning from Amsterdam, over in Pune, Cardiff, all over Europe, all over India. So thank you so much for joining us, guys. We really appreciate you getting up early and joining us every morning. So, I mean, Ziv, before we get into more about the company, can you tell us a little bit about your background? What got you to Paygilant?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in the cybersecurity and fraud space for more than 20 years now, mainly dealing with cybercrime and fraud, working with banks, financial organizations, payments, and other companies, helping them actually balancing between reducing fraud and risk, and also at the same time also enabling the business, because security is all about enabling your business rather than just stopping attacks and preventing attacks. And with such an approach, you actually are always working in line with what the business goals are and what the customers would like to achieve as part of the different fraud and cybercrime strategies.
And I guess I mean, the whole world has gone digital or go digital. I mean, this is more important than ever before for organizations to really pay attention to, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the world is going digital big time. I mean, we're seeing digital transactions skyrocketing, and it doesn't matter whether that's on the payment side, where most of the people today use their digital channels like clearly online and mostly mobile, because we use our mobile devices on a daily basis, almost 24/7. So clearly we also do that when we pay, when we transfer money, when we purchase goods online and in store. Now, of course, with contactless alternatives. So we're seeing digital transactions, again, increasing quite dramatically. And during this time, it is increasing much faster due to the fact that people are just locked down. COVID has changed everything. Now it's the new norm. And it's forcing people to use their digital channels to do whatever they used to be doing before COVID outbreak. So that's the shift that we are seeing in the market.
Definitely. I mean, like you say, it's forced everybody into that digital sort of mindset, isn't it? If they want to continue doing things. So, tell us a little bit more about Paygilant then. What's the purpose of the company, and when did it be founded?
So what we had in mind when we looked at Paygilant, when we started Paygilant, was this shift that started a few years ago, as we've just mentioned it, where the old banking and kinds of payments has moved to or transitioned to new digital channels and mainly mobile. And of course, with that and with this transition, you can keep relying on the same traditional solutions and security controls in order to address the new banking services and the new payment services. So there was some kind of a gap here that we looked at bridging. And this gap has to do with a very simple question, like, what is really more important to you as a challenger bank, as an e-wallet, as a new company which is now providing new services to the market and disrupting the market, whether that's preventing fraud, whether it's reducing the friction, as a result, and of course, as a result of that, also enhancing the customer's experience. And that's one of the main differentiators of all those companies, because that's how they attract new customers. It's not just about the exchange rates, but it's also about the new products and the extremely, enhanced user experience. And of course, with that, also privacy. So how do you do all that in such a way that you enable the business to grow, you enable these new fintech services to be provided without losing money to fraud and without compromising on the user's privacy. And that's exactly what Paygilant does. It balances among all those three, goals, and it just bridges all those again gaps to reach a point where the business can grow. So all those fintech companies can keep providing their services without being concerned of losing money, applying with the new regulations, and at the same time also ensuring their customers' privacy.
Fantastic. Well, we'll dig into that in a little bit in a second. But you guys are, as we said at the top of this, you're based over in Tel Aviv. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. We are in Tel Aviv.
How's the? I mean, we've spoken to a lot of people on the show from around the planet so far since we started this, and COVID's affected different places in very, very different ways. But how have you guys been affected during this time?
So I guess on a personal level, like everybody else around the world, I mean, with lockdown and everything and adjusting to the new, day-to-day lives, I mean, that's been difficult, no doubt about that. We all have, families, kids, and also ourselves. Now we need to stay at home and not go to the office as we used to, and so forth. So that's definitely one major change that we've learned to adjust to. And today it is the new norm, so things are much easier today at a personal level. On a business level, that hasn't really affected us so much because our operation is designed already to work diversely. So some of us work from the office, others work remotely. We also have our HQ in Israel, but we have offices all over the world. So working, like in satellite mode is something that we used to anyway. So from that perspective, that's been good, and that also enabled us to keep providing our services without any interruptions, because things are definitely interrupting on our customers' side as a result of COVID.
Yeah, it's been interesting, isn't it? The amount of people who are finding things that through this period they'll actually adopt much more broadly. There's like say a little bit more home time, a little bit less traveling, a little bit more remote working. Do you think it will kind of affect how you guys work long term?
Well, I guess so, because I strongly believe in work-life balance. Post-COVID doesn't really matter. You have to balance your life, right? So the time that you have now with the kids and everything, well, there is also a trade-off, because the time you spend with your family and kids, doing other things, that's one. That's like, one aspect to look at it. But on the other hand, think about it. Like, before COVID, we've been traveling a lot. So you spend lots of time at the airports. You spend lots of time in meetings, face-to-face meetings, and so on. You just simply don't have it today. So you're much more productive than you used to be, before COVID. And we are seeing it. We're seeing it internally by the, internal activities and the ability to really just promote and enhance our technology and do things much faster. And two, we're also seeing it with our projects when we engage with our customers. So with the backlog and with all the hurdle that comes with COVID and the fact that people work remotely and they need to adjust to, just like allocating resources differently, still they're able to move forward and progress with the plans that were even before COVID started. So I think that the bottom line here, we're all adjusting to the new situation, but with that, it's not stopping us, but it's helping us moving forward. Only that we are adopting new ways of working.
Yeah, and it is interesting. I mean, as you say, perversely, we're less international than ever because we can't travel. But actually, from our perspective, we're doing more international work than ever before because it used to be traveling for 2 days to go do a week's worth of work or 3 days worth of work in New York or wherever. Whereas actually with everybody really adopting video conferencing, you can work with anybody wherever they are, 24/7 really, which is amazing. I guess the only challenge is stopping it being 24/7 at this stage, isn't it? Given the balance between work and life. But before you were at this organization, I mean, you were at Trusteer as well, weren't you? Which I mean, obviously the sort of result of that, for anybody who doesn't know, Trusteer was acquired by IBM. I mean, there's a lot of lessons that you can take from that into what you're doing now with Paygilant, isn't it? Because where are you looking to get to with the company?
So absolutely. I mean, with Steer, one of the things that I've learned is to look at the market from two different angles. One is from the fraudster side and how do they plan, craft, and execute their attacks. And on the other hand, it's from the bank side to see what kind of countermeasures they need to put in place and how do they handle the situation with all the processes and regulations that they have to work according to. And that's where the gap is. So one of the lessons is this gap has to be breached, because on one hand, fraudsters work extremely fast. They don't wait. They have patience, but they don't wait. On the other hand, banks work extremely slow, right? Especially when we're talking about incumbent banks. Challenger banks move faster. So this is exactly the gap, and that's what we did at Steer. I mean, developing technologies and solutions that can help the banks just combat with the dynamic attacks and the emerging attacks without impacting their internal processes. So we could address the emerging threats and be able to stop fraud attacks without impacting, I would say, the again, processes and regulation, the way the banks are used to operate. And that's exactly what I took to Paygilant as well. Because what we did here, we designed a system which is a bespoke system, right? It's tailored for the new banking, for the new e-money companies, where on one hand, they don't need to basically do anything beyond just, here's your app, connect it to the box and get it all out of the box right away. So full coverage for the fraud cases, which I'm sure we'll touch in a few minutes. With that, of course, do not compromise on the user experience, but reduce the friction as much as possible, and also get value from day one. And value from day one means, the market can no longer be tolerant to putting systems in place, giving them the luxury of collecting data and building models and training for months. And only after that, they can start predicting what's going to happen next. That's not the case today. The fraud has changed, and we need to be dynamic enough and flexible and agile enough to be able to address those threats and stop, such fraudulent attempts before money leaves the account.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Obviously, any business that's B2B in this space, I mean, in any space in the B2B sense, it's awareness of the product that actually helps you, or awareness of the product or awareness of the problem. Those two things are the things that you kind of need to sort of be able to scale these things kind of effectively. If people have no awareness of the problem, they're in trouble. But obviously, this is a fraud. This is fraud. Every organization that's dealing in financial services has an awareness of that and the significance of kind of fixing it. How are you guys going about the second one of those, which is the awareness of the product? Because obviously, different people sort of take different approaches to that, with partnerships to go to market, or going direct to consumers, or working with other players to do it. Because that for me is always the really difficult one.
Right. So we do it all. I mean, we work directly with customers, and then they just, they have their own community, right? So if one is happy with the solution, then immediately that is being spread around, and it's word of mouth. So that's one channel, and you wouldn't believe it, but this is one of the fastest growing channels for us.
Yeah.
Two, we do work.
I definitely would. That honestly, I think that is that's the perfect answer. It's your happy customers or your best marketing spend, because essentially at that point what they're doing is exactly like you say, is if you meet the needs and successfully solve the problem for somebody, they're going to tell 20 other people, look how smart we are, we've solved this thing. And that for you is, that has people coming to you rather than you going to them, right?
Absolutely. And we also, being very direct with our customers about what we can do and what we cannot do. So not telling stories, for example, or promising, over-promising and undelivering. So that's definitely not something that we do. We tend to keep our reputation very high in the quality of the product, and it just pays off. So yes, that's one channel. Another one is clearly working with partners. So we do work with, for example, payment service providers and banking service providers, which provide Paygilant services to their banks in order to just move them to the next level when it comes to fraud prevention, especially on mobile, because they're still using the old technologies or the previous technologies that were designed mostly for web or even call centers. It just doesn't work. So that's another channel. And 3 is all the regular like social and media and all the other channels that are putting our name out there, and we're getting requests from all over the world. I mean, you started the show, by saying we have an audience. That's exactly what we're also receiving requests from so many countries.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, obviously during this period, as we sort of talked about earlier on, more and more people are being forced to sort of move to digital, and as you say, to continue sort of working with organizations. But I mean, have you guys seen an increase of fraud during this period? And I guess is there any particular regions or countries where you've seen it hit a little bit harder since lockdown?
So absolutely, yes. I mean, just Q1 this year, I mean, we've seen an increase of more than 70% when it comes to mobile payments and mobile banking fraud.
Wow.
And the reason for that is simple. Well, there are several reasons, but one is, as we said, people during lockdown, they're not going outside, so they cannot even go to the bank's branches for those who used to do that. 2 is you cannot use cash, you cannot use card. That's a way for you to transfer money or buy, products. So with that, of course, and with the increase in transactions, there's also an increase in fraud and different types of fraud. One is like a new account opening. So new account opening is a great way for fraudsters to do 2 things. One is AML, so they're money laundering, and 2 is just to open fake accounts and transact. And that's something that we're seeing, which is really on the rise. We're seeing more and more attacks where fraudsters are able to fly under the radar of the KYC processes as well, open, like fake accounts and then transact. That's one. And the problem with that is that KYC has to be in place. You need to onboard your customers digitally in such a way. But just remember that if you made a mistake and you onboarded a fraudster, then that's a game over, because now this person is whitelisted, certified, permitted, and they can just keep using the banking services and transfer money, and they fly below under the radar. That's one. 2 is account takeover. Like, it's been here for a very long time, but it's very much alive and kicking when it comes to mobile, because it's much easier to use just a single phone to play all the tricks of resetting it to factory default, changing SIM cards, using some virtual numbers, and the list of those tricks is quite long. And at the end of the day, taking over one's account by launching a basic phishing or social engineering attack can help them get in, sign in, and then just transact. And by the time that the customer or the bank even finds out that there is something abnormal, that's too late and too much money is already gone. So we are definitely seeing an increase, in the number of attacks. So it's more or less the same type of attacks, only on a much larger scale.
Yeah. It's scary, isn't it? It's like you say, it's we always say criminals are probably the most entrepreneurial people out there. They're always looking for opportunities, right? So but what should people do, I guess, in this period in terms of trying to protect themselves?
So let's look at it again from a consumer point of view and a company point of view, right? I mean, from a consumer point of view, I guess I'm gonna keep providing the same recommendations as we've been providing all over. One is, if you get an email from a bank and it looks suspicious, do not open it. I mean, one of the ways for fraudsters to find their way into your account is to send fake apps. So you can immediately see that this is an app that wasn't even on the certified app store or the Google Play. So there is really there is no need, and I would even say, do not do that. Do not open such an app, because most probably it can lead to a way into your account, and then your money might be at risk. So those are the basic recommendations for consumers. You're getting an SMS, you're getting a text message, very cautious about whether to open it or not. The bank usually does not do that. So that's one. Companies, well, surely you have to put the right solution in place to ensure that you are getting all those fraud attempts and fraud attacks under control, and that they are prevented before the fraudsters has managed have managed to get access to the account, open a fake one, and of course made a transaction. That's one. Keeping in mind that it has to be in line with the philosophy and with the strategy of the bank. So if this is a challenger bank, a neobank, then customer experience is really the main business goals. And you have to ensure that the friction not only remains as it is, but it is also reduced. And there are ways, to do that. And that's exactly what we do, like replacing all the friction authentication with seamless authentication, but still fully complying with the regulation and being able to strongly identify and authenticate a customer.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I think, as you say, I mean, ultimately fraud, and I've had this conversation with quite a few people before, but fraud is a business decision, isn't it? Really, actually, the amount of fraud you allow is a balance in the main between customer experience and fraud, because the easier you allow it for consumers to get in and get access to their money, the easier essentially you're making it for fraudsters potentially to get into their money. But actually, what I like about what you've done is you've changed that balance. You've made it so that actually by using your product and using data much more effectively and actually monitoring what's happening on the behind that, you can increase customer experience and increase fraud protection at the same time, can't you?
Well, that's 100% true. I mean, in the past, there was this trade-off. There's still, the trade-off of what is more important to you, right? I mean, you want more security, then just the compromise is going to be the user experience and vice versa. What we did here, we really managed to, again, bridge this gap and get to a point where both can be achieved. So on one hand, we're looking at not just the transaction phase, but the entire user's journey. So when you analyze the user's journey and are waiting for the transaction to occur, you can have much more visibility and you can start building, the risk level from the first second that the app, for example, was downloaded, installed, and opened on the consumer's mobile phone. And then there is the onboarding or the signing in. Later on, you're adding some kind of payment methods. If that's a payment app, or if it's a bank, then you need to add an amount and select the contact person. And only afterwards, you're actually sending the money. So when you analyze the entire user's journey and you capture the most significant data points that contribute most to the detection of the customer, and of course also the detection of abnormal activity that indicates on fraud, then you can really enable both. Because if this is your real customer, then you can detect that this is the same phone strongly, that it hasn't been compromised. 2, this is your real customer currently behaving by the same way they hold the phone, biometrically. And of course, how do they engage and interact with the application normally? What are their transactions, normal habits and spending habits? And if you reach the conclusion that they all match, then why bother your customer with an extra SMS or ask them to put a PIN code or send them 6 digits or even a fingerprint? That can be replaced with a seamless user experience. So you're getting both. You're not taking the risk of losing money to fraud, but at the same time, you are enabling your customers to complete their transactions without being bothered along the way.
Yeah. No, it is a much better way of doing it. As you say, it's the old way is the equivalent of having 2 big bouncers on the front door of a club, right? But having no security when you're actually inside the establishment. Whereas actually what you're doing is it's not just about getting access to it. It's about does everything that they do in their interactions, and that pattern, as you say, that you built up of the way in which they interact, the payments that they do, that all is it's the sort of DNA heartbeat of actually identifying them as a consumer, isn't it? And like I say, it's a much more sophisticated way. It's I guess getting the banks to adopt it at that scale, which is really the challenge. Because as you say, the big incumbents really have the biggest problems with fraud, right? Criminals are quite smart. If they're going to go to all of the effort, they want to get some big payoff, don't they? So, I mean, how are you finding the interactions with the big incumbent banks right now?
Well, not much has actually changed. I'll tell you where the big challenge is. The challenge is that the big banks, as opposed to, for example, the challenger banks, they have the funds, they have skills, of course experience, and they also have their own teams, right? Invested heavily during the last decades, even in security controls and solutions, also for fraud, and that's what I've been doing with Trusteer, and before that with RSA. So they are protected to a certain extent. They keep enhancing it, but they're enhancing it incrementally. So for example, we work with the incumbent banks more on the mobile channel, because the mobile channel is the least secure channel, and they do not have the right countermeasures in place and the technology in place to address exactly what we've just mentioned, right? I mean, this balance between a great user experience so that they can compete with the challenger banks, but at the same time also ensure that their fraud risk stays low. So that's what we do with them. It is definitely a challenge. I'll tell you that with the challenger banks, it's a much bigger challenge, because they do not have, everything that the big banks, the incumbent banks have, all the funds and the budgets and everything else, and they need to acquire the customer's trust. Yeah. Because if they want to, and they do, move from disruption to growth, and also from domestic growth to an international growth, then they have to do two things. Like, one is definitely gain the customer's trust. And how do you get the trust? You get the trust by ensuring that the customers are not involved in any, fraud cases. They don't feel that their money is not secured. On one hand, on the other hand, they demand this great user experience that the bank has offered from day one. And their demands are just increasing and increasing. So it's not going backwards. They want better service and better service. So the challenge, and what we do with the challenger banks, is even more interesting, because we have to look at it from a 360-degree angle, rather than just looking at specifically the mobile channel.
Yeah, it is interesting, and it's one that I think consumers are going to become increasingly more aware of and increasingly more demanding of, in terms of actually what that level of experience is for fraud and security mechanisms. But it's definitely one of those ones for sure that is not going to be going away anytime soon. And as you say, as digital gets bigger and bigger and bigger, then this is only going to be more and more important. But unfortunately, do you know what? That half an hour absolutely disappeared. So Ziv, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We really, really appreciate you taking the time. Where can people learn a little bit more about you and Paygilant?
So first of all, I mean, tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken, tomorrow we're having a webinar about this topic. So if people would like to learn more about it and get more insight from our experts, then they're welcome to just navigate to our website, browse to the website, and register for the webinar. That's one. And two, I mean, on our website, you can reach out, and we'll be more than happy to, share more information about it and learn more about each and every one of the challenges, and then we'll be happy to address them as well.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for joining us this morning, and great to see you're safe and sound over in Tel Aviv. All right, guys, that's all we have for you today, I'm afraid, but we will be back tomorrow, where we've got Lex Sokenlin, who is the global head of fintech at Consensus. It's going to be a really interesting chat. I hope you guys can make it, but that's all we have for you today. We'll see you guys the same time, same place tomorrow. Have a great day, everybody. Stay safe.
Thank you, David.